Hi there and welcome back. How are you today? How are you feeling? In this beautiful video, we wanted to touch on something that came up in a coaching session this week about how the soul is here for all of it. All of it. Now, I was in the middle of a coaching session and the topic of judgments was the topic that had come up. And we were talking about, the things that we see as bad things or wrong. Our judgments make it so. And, one of the things that came up was, why can't we love that about us? Say, arrogance was one of the topics that kept coming up. If we came here to know firsthand, what does it feel like to be arrogant? If the soul chose this, I want to know, what does that feel like? What does it feel like when other people are arrogant towards me? How does it make you feel? Makes you feel less than, makes you feel tiny, tiny, tiny. Makes you feel small when people are arrogant. They make you want to shrink. And then what does it feel like when you're arrogant? How does that feel within you when you're in those shoes? Now, what came up as I was going through this coaching session is what I want to share here. When I was little, I would have been about 10 years old, and I still remember. I was about 9, 10. And at the time, the movie Roots had just come out. It was fresh. And I don't know why my dad let me watch it with him, but we sat and we watched it together. It was like a series at the time that ran over 3 days or 4 days, I forget, but it was over a few days that we watched it. And I was so deeply affected at the time. As a child, I was deeply affected by many things. When I'd see, commercials about children that were starving in Africa, I would spend weeks and weeks and weeks bombarding my parents with questions. Why? 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 And of course, they had no answers. And with Roots, that stayed with me for years. When I watched that, I just felt this deep connection. And I didn't know why. And again, I was bombarding my dad with all these questions. Why? 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 Trying to understand. A few years ago now, I'm trying to think, 3 years ago now, I was doing this incredible somatic breath work with this gorgeous man called Victor Odo. And they do these events, these live events. And this somatic breathwork was one of them. And at the time, in this lifetime, for whatever reason, I've always felt that I don't feel free. And I look around me and I can't imagine why, So going into this somatic breathwork, that was my intention. My question all the way through was why? Why do I not feel free? In this lifetime, what is going on that I can't feel free? And as we went into that beautiful breath work, I got to witness lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of being separated from my parents, separated from my loved ones, shipped off, sold as a slave, watching my life as a slave, only to die very young because of the poor conditions we had to live in, to come back again to another lifetime, to be separated again, shipped off again, sold again as a slave, over and over and over, dying so young in so many lifetimes because of malnourishment, because of the treatment, how we were treated. I could feel the shackles on my wrists, on my ankles, and just, it was just so overwhelming, that whole somatic breath work. I couldn't stop crying. And I realized then why I felt such a strong connection to that movie when I was so little. So, you know, I sat with that for a while. And I think that is in, it's either in You Can Change Your Past or it's I Am Light, I Am Dark, because I'd gone through that experience of those past lifetime regressions. And I just got to witness, to remember it all again. It was all sitting in my system. Again, I find when the memories are so painful, we just suppress them and they just stay in our system, but we don't release them, you know? And so we go into other lifetimes much later, and because we haven't returned all of that back to love, you know, it's still sitting in our system. It's still heavy in our system. So I sat with it, but I was still not feeling the freedom that I was yearning for. You know, in this lifetime, for me, there's been a yearning for freedom and for peace. They're the two main ones for me, because love, I feel, has always been there, you know, with all the different partners that I've had, with my daughter. I just feel that hasn't been the biggest one that my heart's yearning for. It's always been peace and freedom, this freedom. At the end of last year, I went in again to do this beautiful somatic breath work with this incredible man, Victor Odo, and he has his own beautiful YouTube channel. So I'll put his name in the description below, because I just love the work that he and Aaron Doty do in the world. They're just incredible, incredible beings. But last year, at the end of last year, I went in to do that somatic breath work again with him. And the information that came through just absolutely, it rocked my world. It completely blew my mind. And it wasn't something that I was expecting to receive, you know, all this information. But what happened, again, I went in and I said, okay, I've received all this beautiful information from all these past lifetimes of being separated from my family, of everything we've been through, all those experiences, but I still don't feel free, I was saying. And that was my intention. I just felt like that wasn't it. It wasn't done, if you know what I mean, you know? And so I went in with the intention again of, okay, I just, show me, you know, what is it that I need to know for this to be released from my system, for me to be able to let this return to love? What am I not seeing? And through that beautiful somatic breath work, I was taken through lifetimes where I was the captor and I was the one selling the slaves, and other lifetimes where I was wealthy and I was corrupt and I was, you know, sending off armies to die so that I could get more wealth and dominion over more land. Lifetimes of being on the other side of the experience and what that felt like, you know. And the beautiful part of that experience was that once I saw all these different lifetimes of being the corrupt one, of being the abuser, of being the captor, the one that was going over to enslave, putting them on the ships, being the ones in other countries that were selling them, making profit from these beautiful beings. In the same beautiful meditation, the somatic breath work, what I was shown is that part of me, that was the parts of me that had been slaves in so many lifetimes, were coming in, and they were forming this circle. And at the same time, the parts of me that had been the captor, that had been the ones that had sold them, that had been the ones that had profited from them, the ones that were on the other side of the experience, you know, they were all coming forward, all the different me's, all these different experiences, creating this gorgeous circle. And once the circle was complete, my beautiful spirit guides surrounded this whole circle, and it was filled with light. It was filled with this light. It was such an incredible feeling, and it was in that moment that I felt the release, because I understood. My soul had chosen all the experiences, not just the one where I was the victim, not just the one where I was the perpetrator, but all of the experiences involved, that my soul could see every single angle of this same experience. You know, my beautiful friend in New Zealand once said, it's like the experience is this in the middle, right? And we are this circle around this one experience. So say in this experience you are the victim, let's call it that. And that's the center of this experience. And outside is this big circle. And you are just standing here looking at it from this angle. One angle, one view, one perspective of this experience. But as she was saying to me, there's a whole circle. There's a whole circle. This is what came out for her when I shared that beautiful experience with her. There are 360 degrees, 360 different perspectives, different angles that we could be looking at the same experience. And this is what the soul yearns for. This is what the soul desires. It doesn't desire to just be the victim. It doesn't desire to just be the one that's bullied. What does it feel like to be the bully? What does the other side feel like? What does it feel like to be the parents of the one that's being bullied, and you're witnessing your child and you can't do anything about it? What does it feel like to be the siblings of this one that's being bullied? Especially if you're not being bullied, but you have to watch them suffer. There are so many different ways to have the same experience. And this realization came to me in this lifetime when, as a little one, I had to endure my mum yelling at me and smacking me, and I knew how that made me feel. And as I was growing up, I swore that I would never do that to my children. I would never smack them, and I would never yell at them, because I knew how bad that made me feel inside. How bad. And yet, when my daughter was born, I found myself, she was 2 years old, and I was yelling at her. And I yelled at her until she was about 4. And then one day I was sitting with myself. Why? Why am I yelling at her? Why do I feel the need to yell at her? What is wrong with me? Was basically, what is wrong with me? I swore I would never do this. Why am I doing this? And then I started to trace back to that morning. What triggered that in me? Because what she had done didn't really bother me that much. That wasn't really the reason that I was yelling. It wasn't what she had done. It was never what she had done. These were simple things. It didn't bother me if she had spilt something and I had to clean it up. It didn't bother me. That wasn't the reason I was angry or I was yelling or I felt frustrated. But yes, it was the frustration. And when I traced it back, I realized it always had to do with finance. Because I didn't have the money to pay for the mortgage. I didn't have the money to pay for a bill. And I'd received, that late notice payment or whatever it is, or I'd received a phone call from the bank that you're a week behind or when you're going to pay for it. And in that moment, I took it out on her because she was there. And when I realized that, I thought, oh, okay, this is the reason why I'm yelling. There's really nothing to do with her. And so I went out and I sought help. I went to a financial counselor and I worked out, well, how do we do this? Because I've never been taught. I didn't know how to do it. It was that simple. And he walked me through it and he taught me how to budget. He taught me everything. And from there, things started to shift. But for me, the gift wasn't complete yet. I hadn't realized until later. And even so, that came up in the first book, Your Past is a Gift, which was published in 2017. By that stage, my daughter was 5. So this is just in the year to follow. As I was writing that book, this beautiful information came through. One thing is to be the one that is yelled at, and you feel yourself contracting, and you feel yourself shrinking, and you feel yourself like, stop. But you have no control over that because you're the little one, and you're at the hands of this big person, this big being. You have no control. So how does that feel? You know, I was terrified of my mum, absolutely terrified of her outbursts. You know, when she'd come to yell at me or smack me, or because they felt random. I never knew what I did wrong. I didn't know what had triggered it. I just knew that, oh, here she comes. I could hear her stomping towards me, yelling at me. I thought, well, here we go. But then I got to have the experience from the other side of it. I'm the one that's yelling now at this tiny little being that needs my support, needs my encouragement, needs my patience while she's learning, while she's growing. How does that feel? And I can honestly tell you it feels awful when you're watching your little ones shrink because now you're yelling at them. I got to have that experience on both sides. So, my beautiful beings, sometimes in a lifetime you can get to see 2 sides of an experience. You can be abused in a certain way in your childhood, and you can become the abuser when you're the grown-up, when you're the adult, if you continue that pattern. But know in your heart today that if you have continued that pattern, that is what your soul wanted to experience. It wanted to know, well, now that I've received it from that perspective, that experience, what does it feel like from the other side of it? Now that I'm the grown-up, now that I'm the adult. What does it feel like? All right, my beautiful beings, your soul came for all of it. All of it. Bye for now. Remember to click like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the messages.